Hi, I'm Erin Leach, and you're listening to the In the Middle of It podcast. This is a space for the ambitious woman navigating the beautiful, messy intersection of motherhood, business, and spirituality. We're here to get real about what it actually looks like to build a life that feels aligned from the inside out while moving through the seasons that stretch and shape you into the best version of yourself. So whether you're in a season of high-speed growth or quiet reflection, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Let's get ready for this week's episode. Hey friend, welcome back to In the Middle of It. I am Erin Leach, and as much as I want to say that it is March and we are feeling the little hints of spring, I unfortunately cannot say that as I look out my window and I see more snow falling from the sky. So, as we hope for some hints of spring pretty soon, got me thinking back to all the way last summer when I was doing some work in the yard and just, I didn't have headphones or anything. So the thoughts are flowing and I was thinking about how similar gardening can be to just like our life in general. So I want to talk about that a little bit more because I feel like it's relevant to what we've been talking about the past few weeks and in the context of the year of the fire horse. Well, more so the year of the snake with the shedding and making space for things that feel more aligned, all of that good stuff. So back to that day last summer, I'm out in the yard gardening, putting in some nice pretty flowers, getting some color in our yard. And if you aren't a gardener, may or may not be familiar with the process of deadheading, but if you've done any planting, you definitely know what I'm talking about, whether you call it deadheading or not. But it's really just the process of taking any of the dead faded flowers, leaves, etc. from the plant and therefore it making space for new ones to grow. And it seems really small just to take the dead stuff away, but it is actually really important because then, like I said, because if you're leaving those dead blooms on the stem, then the plant is going to keep putting its energy into trying to sustain something it's already gone or it's on its way. And the second that you snip it off, you send a different signal to the plant, so to speak, that it can redirect its life force to create something new and vibrant. So as I was doing that for some of the new flowers that we got last year, it struck me really hard the similarity between that, a simple gardening task, and just the way that a lot of us tend to live our life, holding on to things, whether that be objects or habits, all the way to like a completely old version of yourself, relationships, you name it. We do tend to hold on to things that have stopped metaphorically blooming and pouring our energy into those things and then wondering why we feel tired and stuck sometimes. So I thought it was really interesting, and the universe is not going to give you what is truly meant for you, what is aligned for you, if your hands, your life are already full of things that don't serve you. You got to make some space, clear out the dead weight, trim the fat, so to speak, and then that'll create space for these new aligned things to come into your life. So let's talk a little bit more about that energetic and emotional process of clearing this space, especially with the upcoming spring cleaning vibes. Starts to get warmer outside and you want to open the windows, you want to let all the fresh air in and cleaning, just getting rid of the stagnant winter air. So this is a really great time to talk about all of this clearing space. And as of more recently, over the fall, I want to say, I was deep into this process. Maybe it was a little bit of nesting vibes, but also just so done holding on to things that didn't need to be around anymore. And I'm talking physically. We were cleaning out our basement just doing all the different things to prepare for baby Lewis. Let me tell you, there is nothing that will motivate you more to prune your life quite like a new human coming into the mix. I don't know if it's just the pregnant energy. I don't know if my husband felt this same way, but especially knowing that we had things that we wanted to do around the house and, little projects here and there in order to prepare for him. I just got in this mood of like, if I don't think we're going to use it, if we haven't used it in a while, it's going. Bye. And if I regret that decision later, then you know what? It's just a thing. We can just buy it again. Of course, obviously, the sustainability voice inside my head says, but if you just had it, you wouldn't need to buy it, yada, yada. Yes. But sometimes the decision to let these things go were not as easy. And a lot of those decisions were wrapped up in what I was making it mean about myself or like some kind of identity that I attached to it. So, example, I found these carpet tiles that I had from an old studio space that I used to have. And I didn't end up using the whole box for the studio. So I brought them home, and my plan was to use them in our home gym space to kind of like spruce it up. It's in the basement. It's pretty drab. So I don't always love working out down there, and thought that making it a little bit nicer would motivate me to actually want to be down there more. But instead, they sat in a box for ages and ages. So let's say they were downstairs for approximately 3 to 4 years. They never moved. Maybe they moved around the basement, but they never were used in the way that I intended. And every time I looked at the box, I felt this sting of guilt that I spend money on these. And if I throw them away, I'm literally throwing away money. And also the disappointment too, knowing that there was something that I wanted to do and I did not follow through and do it. But I had to just stop and have a frank conversation with myself and realize that it's not really money that I'm saving if those tiles are just acting as like this heavy weight in the basement and in my mind. And I really had to stop making those tiles mean something about my character, not a failure for not finishing the project. Just been in different seasons, and by letting them go, not losing money, but I'm gaining the energy that was previously tied up in that should have, could have, would have project. And I went through this same process when it came time to clean out my crafting closet, which was in now Leon's like big boy room. Over the pandemic, like a lot of people, I picked up a hobby and I became a sewist, and I actually really still love it. So I dove in hard. I bought all the fabric and all the bits and baubles and doodads to go with making mostly bags, but then I started to get into clothes and actually really loved making clothes a lot. So, I had these visions of making our kids' clothes or selling things at craft fairs or even just like my mother-in-law's salon or something. But I had to face the music that, you know what? I need to clear this closet out. So everything was going to move down to the basement. And in the process, I was trying to kind of, purge a little bit, condense the collection down a little bit, because it wasn't just sewing stuff, to be clear. It's also a Cricut machine and the vinyl, and then some acrylic, like resin type stuff that I literally never made anything with. But still, I had to grapple with the fact that I have all this stuff and I have not touched it in a long time, probably years, aside from like one-off little kind of baby project here and there. So same kind of process of letting go of making it mean anything. Because it doesn't mean that I like failed or I wasted money on all this stuff, because there will be a day that I will be able to get back into those things. And I will be able to get my crafty thing on again sometime in the future. And I do genuinely enjoy it. So I know that I'm going to do that. But right now, the priority is not crafting. The priority is my babies, myself, my family, and my business. So I kept what I really loved, the things that I knew I would eventually probably use as gifts for kids or just ourselves, whatever. And then I just donated the rest of it to a local craft bank. And just in the process, it felt really good to make peace in both of those situations with the stuff that I felt like just carried so much guilt. And no one was making me feel guilty about it except for myself. So letting that go, just that mental weight alone, letting that go relieved so much pressure. But then also being able to make peace with that and let go of those carpet tiles, make peace and let go of the crafting stuff that just like didn't speak to me anymore, and not letting it create even more guilt for getting rid of those things. Like I found a way to donate the craft stuff to somewhere that it would actually get used and not just thrown in a landfill or something. Carpet tiles were a different story, but regardless, it felt so freeing to let go of the tangible items, but then also all the meaning I was making out of it. And this applies to your calendar and your relationships too, not just stuff, A few years ago, I really started making a conscious effort to only say yes to things that felt really aligned for me. If a social commitment felt like it was going to drain me more than fill me up, or if I'm just doing it to please someone else out of a guilt, like, oh, I don't want to say no because if the tables were turned, she'd be saying yes to me. I didn't go there, or maybe I did, but I didn't let it drive my decision. So I actually would, for once in my life, pause and not just feel like I needed to immediately answer someone's message. I just really thought about it like, okay, why do I want to say yes to this? What will it feel like if I say yes to this? And if there was good enough reason, then great. Okay. We'll say yes and just kind of like embrace the decision and just know that I said yes to this for these reasons, and that's that. If something felt off, or if I felt like, especially for things that felt like a force to make happen, a friend asking me to get together on a certain day, but I really wanted to do XYZ other things that day. The day that they wanted to get together was not the most ideal for me for whatever reason. I didn't feel bad about that. It took a while to get there. Initially, it was really tough to hit send on the message, and even thinking about my reply to them, feeling like I don't need to over explain myself. No is a full sentence. But obviously, as a friend, I'm going to give a little bit of context and just say, like, I really want to get together, but I've got a ton of stuff that I was planning to do that day. Could we get together a different day? I'm not saying no. I'm just saying not that day. And on top of that, it's also okay to let go of connections that don't feel good anymore. I struggle with this because sometimes the connections that don't really feel good are connections for a reason. Maybe I connected with this person in like a really tough time in my life. So there's like kind of like trauma bonding type stuff going on, or all the different things that could come into deciding whether you want to continue to be someone's friend. But especially when you make that relational space too, same deal. The universe sees that you are ready and you have space for the people who actually like get this current version of you. Another space to declutter that is probably very often overlooked is our mental space. If your head is feeling really heavy or like your thoughts are going a mile a minute, especially I know for me, when I have a hard time falling asleep, it usually means that I have too much going on in my brain and I need to do a good old fashioned brain dump. And this literally just looks like opening up my notebook. I have one notebook that I dedicate to like journaling and like personal writing type stuff. And I just let it flow. If you've ever heard of morning pages from The Artist's Way, I'll link that book in the show notes, but I also came across that in the pandemic. And the morning pages is really just a concept of every morning you sit before you do anything else. She hardcore recommends doing it before you even put your feet on the floor, but for a lot of us, you got to go pee at minimum first thing in the morning. And then like you might want your coffee, whatever. But before you jump into life, you sit and you just write stream of consciousness for 3 pages. The idea behind the morning pages being that you clear out all the gunk before you start your day, and it makes room for your creativity to flow instead of kind of getting gunked up in the muck of your brain. Kind of like an engine, gotta clear out the muck sometimes, clear out the gunk so that your fuel can actually go through the engine in an efficient way and properly get your car going. So I don't necessarily do the morning pages like that anymore, but I do know that when I have a habit and a practice of at least writing a little bit, either in the morning or at the end of the day, it does really help kind of just relieve that mental load. And if anything, I also love to use it when I feel like there's just a million things to do. I'm so overwhelmed and I just write it all down. And then once it's all down on paper, I don't have to worry about forgetting something. It's right there on the paper. Worst case scenario, I just got to comb through my rambling on the page and find whatever I'm looking for. And usually in that kind of a case, I'll do the brain dump in my journal and then I will go back through it and make a task list from it. Once I've just gotten it all out and I'm not trying to sift through my thoughts in my brain and create a list, they're all just right in front of me. And it makes it a little bit easier to organize those things. So there's a ton of ways and a ton of spaces where clearing the clutter and letting go, pruning, deadheading for you gardening folks has so many benefits. It's actually really necessary for our well-being, honestly. On the more spiritual side, we can think about the law of the vacuum that basically is just saying that when there's a void, when there is space, the universe is bound to fill that space. So, unfortunately, in a physical sense, I don't always love this because I don't necessarily love just decluttering to refill that space. But generally speaking, like I'm saying with your calendar and your connections, when you let go of what does not serve you anymore, the universe will fill it back up. And ideally, usually, it'll fill it back up with what feels more aligned to you. So, like, even in a business context, saying no to projects that don't really light you up will leave space for projects that do. So I used to get all in my head when early in my photography business, I wanted to take any and every inquiry that came through. It's just experience and money and yada yada. But then eventually, as I got more established, you kind of figure out your niche, you figure out what you do love, and it is not every single inquiry. As a wedding photographer, you figure out the venues that you love, even the time of year that you love. Like, I don't love photographing fall weddings. So I don't really get super excited to say yes to those inquiries. But I would remind myself, instead of feeling that desperation that, oh my goodness, I need to take this inquiry. I don't want to say no. I need the income, yada, yada. I would really just take a deep breath, maybe do like hand on heart kind of deep breath, and know that being the person who says no to things that are not aligned will set me up to receive the things that are aligned. And if you're not feeling the woo-woo kind of stuff, then I still got you. There is actual science also that backs this up. And there's a really famous study from UCLA that found a direct link between high cortisol levels, the stress hormone, and like the density of household projects is how they described it. But basically, the clutter in your home, the more stuff that's in our visual field, the more our brains are in a state of like low-key fight or flight. Our brains are constantly trying to process everything that's around us, whether we realize that or not. So when you have countertop appliances across the whole kitchen that you don't even use anymore, or you hardly ever use, or piles of clothes that are just sitting there because you don't love them, but you haven't done anything with it, your brain is constantly multitasking without you even knowing it, processing all of these visual stimulants. And one way that was really surprising to me, especially from an ADHD perspective, neurodivergent in general, is like labels and words. So I personally would love to have a kitchen, specifically pantry, that has no words. I really don't care that it takes more time to empty out the box of pasta into, like, you see the really aesthetic jars of pasta and rice and beans and yada yada. And like, yeah, on one hand, it's aesthetic. But for me, my personal motivation to do that is just to clear the visual clutter as well, meaning the labels and the colors and the words and everything. You think about opening up wherever your food is stored. Do you ever just look at it like, oh my goodness, where is that box of Cheez-Its? Where, I know we have breadcrumbs that I'm going to use for dinner tonight, but where the heck are they? So there's the organization level of it, but it's also just visually overstimulating as well. And a lot of the times you might not even realize this is happening at all until you make some kind of a change. Like, say you do clear off your kitchen countertops one day. You decide you're going to let go of appliances that you don't use, and then you're going to put away things that don't get used on a regular basis. And then you finish, and you can almost just feel the lighter energy in the room. Like, wow, kind of feel like I can breathe a little easier now that all that stuff is either gone or away and out of sight. And realistically, if your concern is also that, like, if you put something away, you're not going to use it as much, well, maybe that's just the perfect little experiment. And you put it away, and if you don't use it for 6 months or a year or whatever kind of time frame works for you, then maybe you shouldn't have it. Or if it is something that you're worried about not using, then just give yourself a minute to think about, why do you want to keep this? What else is driving you to keep this thing in your life? I'm talking about kitchen appliances, but that is also applicable for anything, for friendships, relationships in general, various commitments, business.
all of the above. So if you don't want to listen to the spirituality behind it, there is actually also science to support this as well. That when you clear the physical space, we are literally giving our nervous systems permission to just exhale and have a little bit of relief. And as I wrap up here, I do want to make a plug to a pretty good podcast that I like listening to a lot from time to time. Honestly, don't listen to as many podcasts as I used to, but this one is called Minimal-ish: Minimalism, Intentional Living, and Motherhood. And it's hosted by Desiree Andres. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but I love her approach to minimalism and her philosophy behind it. And specifically, one episode I listened to recently was with Katie Wells, who has her own minimalism podcast called Maximized Minimalist Podcast. And when Katie was on Desiree's podcast, she talked about the different forms of decisions. And if you've heard of Marie Kondo and her process of decluttering, it might feel a little similar. That with Marie Kondo, you start with the stuff that just doesn't mean anything. Could be kitchen stuff, and you go down the list, what have you, that she has a system that works, and you end with sentimental stuff. And throughout the process, you kind of set aside things that you're getting stuck on, because there's usually a reason. And Katie's philosophy, I believe she also has a book, her philosophy, framework, whatever you want to call it, around decluttering and minimalism shares some similarities, one specifically being around identity. And that was a lot of what I talked about here today, especially in terms of letting go of those carpet tiles and moving my craft closet out of Leon's closet. Sometimes decluttering is incredibly personal, whether it be decluttering physical things and, again, meaning that you're making of it, or if it is just letting go of habits, tendencies, commitments, friendships, relationships, etc. And I just overall really loved the episode with Katie and Desiree. So if you're vibing with this, I would definitely check out either one of those podcasts, because they're both really great. So wrapping up, I want to challenge you to look around your home, your calendar, wherever you feel things are most heavy, and find one thing that you're just keeping alive, metaphorically or whatever, keeping around, keeping alive, just out of habit, guilt, obligation, something like that. And give yourself permission to just let it go, because it's actually going to serve you better when it's not around anymore. And I promise there is something far more beautiful waiting to fill that space for you. So that being said, I am Erin Leach, and this week I want to leave you with a reminder that you are not a museum for your past mistakes. You're not a storage unit for maybe one day aspirations. Our value is not measured by how much we can carry. It's measured by how much we trust ourselves to let go and only carry what matters. I'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to In the Middle of It. If you found some inspiration in this episode, I'm sure it'll inspire others too. So head over to your podcast player, hit that subscribe or follow button, and leave a 5-star rating or review. It might seem small, but your review will help more women find these conversations and join our empowering community. You can also empower the women closest to you with a simple, "Hey, this made me think of you." So text this episode to a friend, or maybe even your mom. Whoever in your life is also in their own messy middle. You can even take a screenshot of this episode, tag me at I am Erin Leach, and post it to your stories. I can't wait to connect with you online until we meet back here again next week for the next episode of In the Middle of It podcast.